Hello and welcome to the Mind Body Soil podcast, a podcast where we explore the innate connection between the mind, the body and the soil. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Smart Soil. Smart Soil is an online education platform creating courses and providing resources from farmers for farmers. Join us as we share the stories and experiences from those dedicated to regenerating ecosystems, communities and human beings. Today we're with Dr Judi Earl, a holistic management educator, grazier, and pasture ecologist. And correct me if I fill in the gaps there, if there's any other titles you'd like to go by, Jude. But
no, that's all fine. Thanks, Dave.
Fantastic. So today we're going to, first up, we'll just map the journey a little bit. So we're looking to go into your journey specifically and gain a bit of context around your experience and what your specialties are, and then really try and go a little bit deeper into how that impacts the health of the mind, the health of the body, and the health of the soil, and where those cross correlations are. So a place to start would be your experience and your background, Jude, and what is it that you do, because you know best.
Okay, I don't know how far back you want to go, but
to the beginning. No.
Born and bred in Sydney, and I guess my first introduction to the land was my dad bought a property in the Central Tablelands at Rylstone when I was quite young, and basically spent all school holidays and every spare moment that we had up on the property. So he was known as a Pitt Street farmer. But that was probably where my love of the land and animals and those sorts of things started off. So I think for as long as I can remember, all I wanted to do was work on the land and with animals, growing up. And that took me to Hawkesbury Ag College, and I did an associate diploma there in animal production, and ended up working with racehorses for a good while before I decided to go back to uni. I actually, the fellow that I set up the consultancy with, Lewis Kahn, I actually met him originally when I was doing that course at Hawkesbury Ag College. So we went back a fair way. But anyway, yes, and he'd also gone down a similar path and was studying at UNE when I turned up there to do rural science. So yes, so 10 or 15 years working on properties, and then went back to uni. Rural science was a pretty conventional sort of an ag degree, I suppose, and then I went on and did a PhD in pasture ecology with Christine Jones as my supervisor. And essentially that led on to the creation of the consultancy, AIMS, which was essentially a partnership with Lewis Kahn. And we worked together for about 20 years in that consultancy. And about 2 years ago, Lewis decided to take a different direction. So I'm flying solo these days with the consultancy work, but as part of that and part of the process of doing my PhD, it was very much focused on what was then known as cell grazing. So it was there that I got introduced to holistic management and the philosophies of Alan Savory. So that was really the genesis of that. And so that's really, I think I started the HM educator program in about 2002, and so that's been sort of infiltrating all of the consultancy work that I do, as well as the work here on the farm, Glen Orton.
I would like you just to paint a little bit of geographical context of where your property is, rainfall type, soil type, and what you're dealing with out there.
Yeah, sure, Dave. The properties just very close to the village of Coolatai, which is considered northwest slopes of New South Wales. It's northeast of Inverell, so a lot of people would be more familiar with Inverell than Coolatai, I think. So it's essentially all grazing. There's quite a few people around the area that do crop or have winter crops for grazing, but there's no area on this place, which is about 1,000 acres, that's suitable for cropping. Aside from that, it's not really an interest of mine. So this soil, so one of the real attractions of this property was the diversity of soil types. It ranges from paddock that I call Bondi, which is essentially beach sand, up to really quite heavy black soils, which with the 5 mils of rain makes it difficult to get around. But and there's I suppose it's about 60% basalt, relatively heavy black soil, and maybe 30% red soil, which is quite bare and was at least quite bare and scalded and quite erosive. And then you've got that corner of sand, which is essentially, dominated by a fair bit of bush and scrub, but it's still part of the grazing plan. Rainfall on average has been historically about 700 mils. So theoretically it's classed as a high rainfall zone, but putting it into the context of one of those holistic management terms in terms of brittleness, I would say it's on the brittle side of mid-range. We have fairly hot, although it's predominantly summer active or summer dominant rainfall. The summers are quite hot and not really very humid. So strongly dominated by warm season species, and of course when I first got here it was pretty much a monoculture of cooler tie grass. So but that's thankfully changing over time.
So that was one of the challenges that you saw on was obviously just a monoculture of cooler tie grass and lack of diversity. So what were some of your goals then in, I guess, acquiring the property and where it started and now where it's at?
Yeah, so I guess the main driver for purchasing the property was to put into practice what I'd been teaching for about 20 years, in terms of using livestock to regenerate land. And when I saw this place, I looked at quite a few. I looked at about 70 properties in total, and not physically, but the attraction of this place was the diversity of soil types and the diversity of timber, of tree species. There was about 20 odd different types of trees on the place, and I just thought that the potential for increasing the diversity of the ground cover was quite high. But the place hadn't been grazed, I think, for about 4 years when I got here. So there was just a big body of old cooler tie grass, and I originally looked at that as being a standing store of carbon, but I significantly underestimated the effort required to actually get that carbon incorporated into the soil using what I started with was only 50 old cows. And
wow.
Yeah, so but we're getting there.
Absolutely. And so where did you then start on the property in terms of, okay, I've got this standing body of cooler tie grass. I want to incorporate this, and so what were your steps in management from there?
So the property originally was broken up into 9 relatively large paddocks, about 50 hectares each, and there was only water to 6 of those paddocks. So the first thing that I did was buy a water truck, so that I could theoretically take the water to the livestock. So a water truck and quite a few rolls of poly tape and tread-ins. And so within those 9 main paddocks, basically tried to effectively get some stock density in areas where I could easily access using the tape and tread-ins and physically get the truck too. And so that was a bit of a challenge. So I think it was about 4 years before I actually started on the first phase of developing the water system, and put in about 4 k's of pipe, and got water to each of the paddocks. So we've been progressing from there.
And is that was that intentional, that sort of 4-year time span, in terms of, you know, you understanding your property further? And, you know, but because I hear a lot of people that get a new property will go holeless bowless and start developing and, you know, doing all this expensive work when really they haven't got that feel for their piece of country yet.
I think you're right, David, and it's one of the things that you know, when I'm talking about property planning, that I put a strong emphasis on is, you know, take your time. My plan didn't change a lot from the initial, but of course, you know, as you get around and in the first stages, you know, I wouldn't. The first thing I had to do actually was get a dozer in to create some tracks so I could physically get to areas of the property. So I forgot that in terms of a first step, but, you know, the cooler grass was, you know, over a meter and a half high in a lot of places. So,
Wow.
so, you know, I wasn't even game to ride the horse around, let alone a quad bike or anything else. So it involved a lot of walking. So there's not too much of the place that I haven't actually physically been through or over. So yeah, it takes time to evolve, just to work out, you know, what's going to be feasible where. And you know, I also didn't have the resources to pull up all the existing fences. I mean, that's a nice idea, you know, to start with a blank slate, but the fences that were there were quite serviceable. They're in mostly good condition. So, you know, I just chose to work within those, and using the tape and tread-ins around, you know, and through those main paddocks. You know, there's probably things that I would change, but you know, the budget is a reality, you know, that you have to work within. But I do encourage people to take their time and let the plan evolve, you know, as you get more familiar with the property, but also, you know, the livestock and the needs of the livestock, you know, where their preferences are, because they certainly have preferences in terms of grazing areas. You know, even though it was pretty much a monoculture of cooler grass, you know, they still would prefer to graze some areas over others. And, you know, I found even having really high stock densities, I think I got up to, you know, 1,000 DSE per hectare in some instances. They would still selectively graze. You know, they're not going to walk over the really rocky areas and impact on those areas. So just getting, you know, finding out the nuances of the whole area was really important, and just take your time to read the landscape and understand, you know, what's going on where, I guess, you know, without over analyzing, but you know, just observing, you know, where they prefer to graze and where water runs and those sorts of things, you know.
Yeah. So the animals, then, by also reading your animals and the way that they're moving around the landscape, you're
absolutely
saying,
yeah.
okay, that obviously is something going on there in that
Yes.
area. Then that's really cool.
And you can adjust the size of the paddocks, you know, based on the terrain and accessibility and all of those things. So
yes.
So over time, I'm up to 63 paddocks now, within those 9 main areas, but I had hoped to get a lot more done by now, but the drought slowed me down a little bit. But I've come back from my original goal of 100 paddocks to about 86. So I've got to get fencing this summer now that the soil's nice and soft to drive some posts. So I'll get back on it.
Bloody oath. And so it's just yourself out there too, isn't it? So it's quite a lot of work for you know, it's not going to happen overnight, is it?
No, well, no. It as I said, it's sort of it has evolved. I guess early days, most of the effort was in, you know, regular setting up and pulling down fences and those sorts of things. But but now with the number of paddocks, that's not such a, there's not that sort of imperative, but I still get the tape out occasionally when it's required, or I want to have a bit of impact in some areas. So but yeah, obviously I've had help from time to time with fencing, and the water was all done by professionals, so I didn't do too much in terms of that. All I do is drag the trough around and tap into the line these days. So
easy.
But yeah, they're all single wire fences, so it's really not much of an effort. You can virtually create a paddock in a day if you set your mind to it, sort of thing. So yeah,
that's really cool. And I just want to go back to how you're saying you almost walked every square meter of the property, and
nearly.
I just think nearly it's a lot of square meters, but I just think that's something that's missing nowadays in our large scale agriculture. And I mean, you hear stories of farmers that haven't even walked their paddocks in years, and they've just been in their tractor or all that time. So do you see greater importance to actually have boots on the ground and be digging holes? And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's I think that there's a real focus on technology these days and finding solutions in bags and drums and those sorts of things, but I don't think that there's anything that in terms of tools, there's nothing more important than actually walking the landscape and observing what's going on. Just yesterday I found a new species, so because my species list is getting up there. I think I'm nearly to 300 species of plants now, but
wow.
But just finding new species, and looking at those areas that are changing, that have changed enormously, and then those areas that have hardly changed at all in 10 years. And as I said, I try not to overanalyze things too much, but you're just sort of looking and looking for the changes that are occurring, and what potentially what I've done here that's created this, or and what I could have done differently previously, or can potentially do in the future. So you're always just looking at every part of the property is different, and it's about modifying and also trying to have animals in the right place, at the right time. So for example, now it's quite wet at the moment, so getting them onto areas that are probably, it's not ideal in terms of the heavy soil, but there's a large amount of biomass in terms of the cooler tire grass still there. So there's the opportunity to get a bit of density and actually get that material onto the ground and incorporated into relatively moist soil, without obviously doing too much damage. But then that area will be allowed to recover, for at least 2 months, maybe longer, subsequently.
Yeah. And I'd like to, just in case there's people listening that aren't familiar with some of the terms that we're discussing, because if they're not from agriculture, I mean, and they're probably like, well, what do you mean the animals are having a positive impact on the land? I've heard that cows are, the devil or whatever. So what are the main tools that the cows and the animals, hoofed animals, are providing?
Well, there's a range. I think a lot of people blame the weight, or cloven hooved animals as being the cause of soil compaction, but to my mind, it's their mouths that do more damage through their impact on plants than on desirable plants particularly, than their hooves. So if you're managing the animals so that they're grazing plants that have been fully recovered or have had the chance to fully recover from a previous grazing event, then those plants are going to have deep root systems. They're going to recover relatively more quickly. And if you leave, at least ideally a minimum of 5 centimetres of green leaf on those plants, then they'll recover from being bitten relatively quickly, and the impact on the root system is going to be minimal. So the roots grow pretty much uninterrupted, and of course, all of the activity in the soil is intimately associated with plant roots. So if you're actually actively managing the plants to optimize photosynthesis and optimize root density and depth, then the actual damage in terms of compaction is minimal, because they're actually, it's almost akin to them walking on, a sponge mattress, if you like, so that the impact is immediate, but because the plants are in ideal condition, the recovery is also relatively quick, if you understand. So,
yes. Yeah.
So there's more damage in terms of compaction done by overgrazing of plants, so that they don't have the extent of the root system. And in the absence of roots in the soil, then there's no life and the soil compacts.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not the hooves of the animals that are the issue, it's their mouths and actually controlling the time that those plants are exposed to animal mouths. So if that makes sense, hopefully
that's really flipped it on its head for me. Oh, that's great.
So I mean that's one thing, and the other side of the coin is, I think it's the thing that most people miss. Talking about the that we need to actually stop eating meat to address climate change or whatever, is that the ruminant animal is probably the main source of biology in the environment these days. Again, with our soils being so degraded, the actual decline in soil biology, I think, is really the key issue and the key problem in most of the grasslands. And if there's no roots in the soil, then there's no habitat for the biology. So in the absence of actively growing vigorous plants with, robust root systems, then most of the biology in the landscape is actually within the gut of the cow. And so we've lost a lot of the small rodents and mammals that were active in nutrient cycling. So the actual ruminant animal is fulfilling a really important niche in terms of driving nutrient cycling. Yes. Because it's soil biota are really the only things that are out there that can actively cycle carbon, can break it down and turn it over and basically create humus.
Absolutely. That's fascinating. And to think about that, because I mean, historically and quite recently, really in recent history, we have removed a lot of the animals. I mean, we've had a separation of this is broadacre cropping, and you're not to have animals in that system.
Yes.
So like you're saying, and then so we're losing that cycling effect. I mean, we're having to put all of our nutrients on through a bag, like you're saying, or at huge expense to both the farmer and the ecosystem. And we're not getting that biological feedback, are we? Yeah, so that's really interesting. And in turn, it would be having then an effect on our health because we're not getting that microbiome from the food, are we? So
exactly. I mean, the microbes basically drive nutrient cycling. So in the absence of healthy biology, then we've turned to putting nutrients on the plants basically to grow food. So when you talk about fertilizers, there are fertilizers that are basically plant food, to basically grow plants. Mm-hmm. And then there are fertilizers that actually enhance soil processes that are designed to enhance soil, basically the function and adequate soil processes, things like gypsum and calcium products to actually open up the soils and improve flocculation and soil water infiltration. So there are those things that actually enhance soil processes, but also stimulate at the same time biological activity. And there are other things such as urea and the single super products that basically are essentially providing plant nutrients. So it's almost like the soil becomes the medium to hold the plants up, rather than the thing that is actually providing nutrients and habitat for nutrients for plants, but also habitat for all of those critters that basically rely on the healthy environment for their effective function. So
yes, and in their original state, with those small rodents and ruminant animals, they would not be required, because there'll be more biological activity because there's actively growing roots and habitat for the microbes. So
that's right. Yeah. So you're relying on mineralization, so the natural processes of mineralization in the soil to provide nutrients for plants. And again, in a healthy soil, those nutrients are present in the right balance. So you're not getting a massive flood of nitrogen, for example, from urea, which has the effect of burning up carbon, or a massive amount of phosphorus in acidic form, or sulfate in acidic form that basically does nothing for soil health and soil processes.
Interesting. And isn't it funny that I guess the same model has been then applied to human nutrition, because obviously we don't have those minerals and whatnot in our food now. So now we're all taking out supplements, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And
I know,
so it's crazy, and probably the same crew sitting behind the products as well. So it's
that's right. So it's a bit sad when most of the mineral nutrition comes from a pill,
canister. Fascinating. But it feels like that narrative is starting to be understood, perhaps, and is changing slowly but surely. And
for sure, it is a growing there, or there is certainly growing recognition of the importance of soils for producing healthy, nutrient dense plants. And there's plenty of research that's been done on that, identifying the changing nutrient levels in various produce, and that knowledge is beyond me, but there, I know that there's plenty of material out there providing evidence for that. But unfortunately, there's also lots of vested interests in the other side, and sticking with convention. So it's a slow process, but without doubt, there is much more awareness of the value of organics, and also the detrimental effects of high input and artificial fertilizers, herbicides, and the like. So
yes, absolutely. And I guess that's part of what we hope to unpack with these conversations is is really highlighting where we're at in terms of, I guess, I mean, you would know better than most in your experience and time in the space, like how quickly it's, I guess, devolved or been moved away from what would have probably been quite more nature-based agriculture early on, but has moved into, like you say, a quite conventional high input systems, and all the way through, to I think it'd be really interesting to get your thoughts on how quickly you've seen and sort of like where we're at in you can talk on whatever context you like, whether it's globally or even locally, but just where you think the where our system or the health of our system is at currently, and sort of how quickly it went backwards, or if I'm off the mark there. It's just
no. I think there's I don't think there's any doubt that it's gone backwards in terms of all of the metrics, soil health, biodiversity. There's more floods, there's more droughts, there's we're needing more interventions in terms of animal health. So there's all sorts of evidence to, I guess, show that, the system is nowhere near as healthy as it was, pre-European times. But by the same token, I'm not quite sure that there's a lot of value in going back to, or, aspiring to what was. I think we've got to start where we are and make that transition. And I keep thinking to myself, how frustrating it is that the change is so slow. But I think agriculture and probably humans generally are fairly conservative bunch, and change is not always easy. And so I keep, on the flip side, I keep reminding myself that I've really only been engaged in the industry, in the grazing industry, for probably 30 years now, and the level of change, even though I find it frustratingly slow, is actually probably quite significant given the time frame, and also given the opposition to it. There's still, as I said, lots of vested interests in maintaining the status quo. But I think with the increasing costs of those fertilizers and chemicals, and I think the drought, the recent drought also highlighted a lot of issues around our conventional approach to agriculture, aside from the number of people that are actually actively working on changing the narrative around the organic food production. So the change is certainly happening. But in terms of where to go from here, I think it's a decision for every individual to take. But we can start to turn the ship around today. Just by changing the way we view nature, I think, rather than being a commodity, or land being a commodity, that if we start to see ourselves as part of it, then it's a big step forward, rather than relying on technology. Just changing the way that we look at our environment is really important.
Absolutely. And I think even the way, like you said, that we look at ourselves, I mean, it's quite obvious that we've been separated, and even in our personal identities, that we don't view ourselves as a part of this intrinsic system, or I mean, we always say it's so beautiful, but really we are part of it, and we can have a really active role in that regeneration of nature.
Most definitely. Yeah.
And so I think that's an exciting point to perhaps change gears on what and how quickly these systems can regenerate, and what you've seen. I mean, out on Glen Orton there, and because that's what gives me hope is seeing, these systems that have been so heavily flogged, and they're in such decline, but how quickly they can come back and start, pumping out diverse plants that have been laying there for their opportunity, just by a change of management. So I think that's a really, really exciting point to cover.
Yeah. So it all depends, and it's funny that it depends is probably the most common used term in most workshops that I deliver. But it certainly depends on the environment, for starters, and probably rather than rainfall specifically, it's that issue around brittleness. So just how much humidity is present in the environment. So it's a term coined by Alan Savory, but if you've got an environment that is quite humid and relatively high rainfall, then the change can be quite rapid. But in a drier environment where the rainfall is more is lower and less reliable, then the change might also take some time. So it's really hard to sort of put an absolute time frame on it. And as I said earlier, there's some places on this property that have changed completely. That there's I actually moved a mob of cows into a paddock that hardly has any cooler tie grass in it the other day.
Wow.
And so for me, that was enormous, to actually be able to put a mob of animals into a 4-hectare area that, only has a few scattered plants of cooler tie grass, from an area that was completely dominated by cooler tie grass. So, but then there are other areas on the place that just have hardly changed from day one. So there's not really an answer. It's a sort of a how long is a piece of string type question.
Yes.
It depends on the physical environment that you're located in, but it also depends on all sorts of soil factors and terrain and distribution of rainfall as well. So even though I've got a 700 mil average annual rainfall here, I think for the first 10 years, there was only 2 years out of that 10 that reached that average level. Wow. So, that's the other thing. I think, talking about averages is not really appropriate in, when we're talking about the natural environment, because every situation is unique. And that, I guess, also comes back to, that holistic management and that unique context that every business, every property, operates within a different set of circumstances, and it's never the same. It changes day to day, season to season, year to year. So, every situation is different. Every property is different. So the rate of change by default is going to be different as well.
Understood. And then you answered the question perfectly anyway, because really I just wanted to hear some sort of something that you've seen that's been like, wow, like this is moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
That's super exciting to hear about the cooler tie grass, because you never really want to get rid of it completely, but you just want to rebalance.
That's right. I just want some other things. Yeah. Yeah. So, and as I said, there are still areas that, you wouldn't know, nothing has changed, but I believe that, the cooler tie grass is down to being dominant in about 50% of the area now. So,
Awesome.
To my mind, that's a big win. But yeah, I see positives almost every day.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure there's days where that's not so positive too, but that's
and I think that's the thing. When you're looking for the good things, that you'll find them. But unfortunately, most farmers, or at least they've got a reputation for being a bit whiny and whinging and those sorts of things. So, we're always really good at finding problems. There'll always be problems there that are easy to find. But if you're actually, actively looking for the positives and managing towards what you want rather than what you don't want, which is what we inherently, I think, are sort of hardwired to do. So it's it flips it on its head, and rather than being in a fight with nature all the time, you're actually working with nature and her processes. So it's a big shift.
Absolutely. And what I guess in that shift as well, I mean, what are some of the changes or challenges that you foresee as being the major hurdles to adoption on a larger scale?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, Dave. I suppose it's been one I've been working on for at least 20 years. But I think the biggest challenge is that, for most people is lies between the ears. It's actually, changing the way that we look at the environment. And, I really think that that's the biggest thing is to start looking with a bit more compassion, not only for the towards the land, but also to each other to a large extent. But
yes.
Being a bit more empathetic with what's going on and understanding all of the creatures that rely on the landscape and within the landscape, and they're not necessarily, just because we don't understand their role or don't see their positives, but understand why they're there. and what interaction they're having with everything else that's around them, because every organism by its presence basically changes the environment one way or the other. And rather than getting out with a big stick and being in a constant battle with the environment, you actually start to try and look at it differently and come to or at least try and understand why those organisms are there, and what we've done to create the circumstances for them to be dominant over something else that we might want there.
Yes.
But, working and trying to understand those interactions is a big step, rather than just, the initial response generally is to go and, buy a shuttle full of Roundup or something along those lines. Most people probably can't afford a shuttle full of Roundup these days. But the weeds are not there because of a deficiency in herbicide. They're responding to something that we've created in that environment, whether it be bare ground or a mineral deficiency in the soil, or an imbalance in the minerals in the soil. Actually taking the time to try and understand what's going on, and coming up with a longer term solution, rather than a quick fix, which is what we want to see a result yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll have a band-aid solution too, don't we? Just patch it up for now and move on to the next problem, like you say.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. It'd be really cool to know if you have any tools that you use to, I guess, cultivate that perspective that you have for landscape and country, or is that I'm sure.
Yeah, look, I guess the main tool really comes that I came to was holistic management, and that whole process, and of course the first step in holistic management is creating your goal, what's now known as a holistic context, but a holistic goal. And if you're really clear about what you want, not only in terms of the environment, but also socially and financially, then that goes such a long way to actually being able to create the circumstances to make that happen. And there are a few fundamentals, I suppose, with holistic management. And, the first is that, or the first insight, as it's known, that Alan had in creating holistic management, or the framework, was that nature functions in wholes. So every time, we do something on some aspect of the environment, it has other implications, and more often than not, they're unintended consequences that, we don't necessarily see. So actually, having a clear goal in mind in terms of, how you want the landscape to look, but also not to be limited by what's there now. I think we're so used to operating in a degraded environment. Most people don't know what a healthy landscape looks like, or healthy soil looks like, So I guess it's, the main thing is to have that goal, and it might not be achieved in your lifetime, but that's no reason not to start to try to work towards that, and that's, I think, the mindset thing. So, if you've got a clear goal in terms of creating a diverse grassland, and clear running water and, open porous soils, then, and building soil carbon, whatever your goals might be, or, just if that's the end point that you're working towards, then, having that goal written down and articulated gives you something to refer to work towards. And it's, I keep emphasizing, it's just so empowering. I think people underestimate, the value of it, but it really is empowering, and it takes away from that reliance that a lot of people have built up on, government departments and agronomists, and, sort of giving responsibility for their decisions to somebody else, but if you actually start to focus on reading the landscape and looking and trying to work out, what you've done to create this scenario and what you've done to create that scenario, and really look at cause and effect, I guess. So not only in terms of problem solving, but also in terms of the good things that have happened, and start to apply in a broader brush. So
absolutely. I mean, we're, like you say, we're very good at solving short-term problems and things like that. We've become very good at it, but to me, it seems like it's that perspective thing. I mean, if we're looking at the time it takes that may be a generational legacy. I mean, what you're talking of is clean running water and trees that grow and things that probably we've taken for granted,
well, absolutely,
in our time. But at some point in time, if we didn't have those things, we were buggered, and still today, if we don't have those things, I mean, we have interventions that can produce them or whatever, but it's not the same. So I think that's a really good insight, actually, is that longer term and long game mindset.
Look, I think it's important, but as I said, I think it really is a mindset change. There's all sorts of financial incentives these days, I guess, to stimulate changes. Carbon credits and carbon trading and biodiversity credits. But I think when people go into those schemes with a view, as like they're solely to create, an additional source of income, then they're limiting themselves in terms of, what's achievable, rather than actually having, intrinsically valuing those things, just for the benefits that they bring, the biodiversity. And so it creates the need for a whole change in attitude is, I guess, what I'm talking to. I think that the financial benefits are great, in terms of looking at diversity of income, but I think the intention has to be the right one first. If you build biodiversity and you build soil carbon, whether you're in those trading schemes or not, you'll see the benefits in terms of the productive potential increasing in your land, not only from a financial perspective, but the ecological production of your landscape. And the two go hand in hand. I think people also tend to see production and conservation as being mutually exclusive, but that nothing could be further from the truth. You need the two.
Absolutely. No, and that's the thing. I mean, either way, is if you have a landscape that is heavily degraded and is just going backwards in condition, it's almost exponential in the sense of how it speeds up in, more some bare ground creates more bare ground. And but the opposite is also true in terms of once you, like you're saying, build that ecological function, that growth is exponential as well, in terms of, I mean, that we don't even know what the upsides are if we were to all adopt these by just changing that paradigm of, conservation and production are, like you say, intrinsically linked. So I think that's beautiful.
And similarly, the social aspects as well as the financial and environmental. I think that the disconnect from our land leads to a whole raft of social issues, aside from anything else. But I keep coming back to the cow. She's got such a great role in repairing so many things. I was just having a conversation the other day. We still have this idea that removing livestock from an area of grassland actually builds biodiversity. It's the second, probably it's equivalent to continuous grazing in the damage that is done from grasslands. Wow. Grasses and grazers evolve together, so grasslands need to be disturbed, and the grazing animal is the perfect combination with grasslands. They evolve together, and when we remove that grazing animal, then grasslands decline and biodiversity declines. So we need the good old cow.
Absolutely. Yeah. Couldn't agree with you more, Jude. And I think the work that you do is so important. And if that's part of, even in my generation, that narrative of, like you say, like, oh, just get the animals out of the system, or like, oh, the virtue signaling that goes along with, oh, well, I'm not eating meat now, so I'm saving the world. I just think,
Yeah.
well, you obviously don't understand the ecosystem well enough, or that isn't, I guess, taught, or it hasn't clicked for people yet.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I think that's where the generational elements come in, because kids are not taught that at school. I was never taught that at school.
no.
It's only basically since I've started looking at the land that I've and listening to a network of people that have got similar ideas, that you start to become aware of it. But I cringe now when I see sort of little kids interviewed on television and saying that we've got to get rid of the cows because not eat meat because they literally have such an important role to play in restoring landscapes, if they're managed appropriately. And it's
That's in big letters, isn't it? Management is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Diana Rogers, I think it says it's not the cow, it's the how, isn't it? So it's
exactly. Yeah.
I'd love to, you've mentioned grasslands and how valuable they are. I mean, I think possibly one of the most undervalued assets that we have, other than the front lawn of every Aussie bloke. Yes. They love their grass, that that monoculture, single well manicured and blah blah blah. But I'd love to get that broader perspective on grasslands and how much of a crucial role they play in those ecosystem services.
Yeah, so but I guess it's another passion is that the fact that most of the land area of this country and probably globally is, technically speaking, grassland. So I think it's something like 60% of the land area of Australia would be defined as grassland. I mean, a lot of it is probably undercrop or now desertified, but that can all be regenerated. To a degree. You're never going to probably be growing 10 ton of lush pasture out in the Simpson Desert, but there's a lot of area out there that can be improved, certainly in terms of ecological function, by appropriate management. And probably there's not too many graziers on the Simpson Desert either. But
I mean, the Simpson Desert could, if managed correctly, technically, with ruminant animals, could potentially be regenerated too. I mean, it's
but potentially. I have come to the conclusion that I don't think there's any land that couldn't be rehabilitated with the appropriate use of grazing livestock. And I was very heartened to hear that they're actually using goats now in terms of bushfire preparedness out here. Mind you, it's a very small mob of goats in a very small area.
Yeah.
But to my mind, it's very enlightened and something that probably could have been incorporated in a lot of the national park areas 20 years ago or more. As soon as you lock areas up and exclude, or take away that natural process of disturbance, then something else is going to fill that gap. And unfortunately, for a lot of the area, it's fire to reduce that load. But grazing animals, again, with appropriate management, have got a really important role to play in managing biomass. And
yes. And that's
what we're designed to do.
Yeah. They didn't grow 4 stomachs for everybody by accident.
Indeed, yes.
And I think, like you said, if globally, I mean, or I don't know if you're talking about Australia specifically, but globally, if 60% of that land surface was grassland or is classified as grassland, I mean, we must be down to what, I don't know, under 10% of that now, potentially with intact grassland. Maybe that's conservative.
No, I think that's a vast overestimate.
Overestimate, okay.
In terms of
Uh-oh.
intact grassland. Oh yeah.
True. Yeah.
I can't say that I've actually seen a hectare of what I would call healthy grassland. Mind you, I'm probably a hard marker,
Yeah.
in terms of, a diversity of species and, really good, healthy, functioning soil with maximum cover. There are a few boxes to tick, but I just don't think that we've got a concept of what a healthy grassland looks like. And obviously it's going to look different on the coast to, on the ranges, and as you get out into the more arid areas, and it'll look different in WA to North Queensland, because every situation and every circumstance is unique. But I'm pretty confident in saying that there's not too many areas of grassland that I see that are functioning to their potential, that couldn't be improved with a more sympathetic approach. And granted, there are a lot of people that are working towards that now, but we need many, many more. I think, one of the best indicators is they did CSIRO did a carbon audit recently, and I don't know whether it was the first, but the carbon stocks on average are down to below 1% soil carbon nationally at the moment. So, if you consider, I don't know, a conservative estimate, pre-European would be at least, most on average, it would have been about 5% soil carbon. So we've lost over 80% of our carbon. So that's a good starting point, and
Holy moly.
Yeah.
And just again to, I guess, demystify that a little bit, carbon, soil carbon, I mean, why is it so important, and why is that such a terrifying statistic?
Soil carbon basically is the foundation of all the soil processes. So and it's primarily derived from photosynthesis. So the capture of sunlight energy into plant material. About 50% of the plant biomass is in the root systems. So, plants are so important for soil health. And the main source of soil carbon is from plant biomass. So, and of course, all of the biology that's associated. So in the absence of soil carbon, we don't have any soil biology, and we don't have any nutrient cycling, and basically soils collapse and become dirt. It's another one of my soapboxes. I get very upset when people refer to soil as dirt, because, soil is a living, breathing organism, ecosystem. And it basically, the foundation of a healthy soil is soil carbon. So whenever the sun shines and grasses grow, soil carbon is a renewable resource, and I think I get very annoyed when people talk about, becoming carbon neutral by 2030 or 2050 or whatever it is. A property can be carbon neutral in 12 months with appropriate management and sympathetic, appropriate utilization of plants and sympathetic management of grasslands, reducing inputs. So, soil carbon is really the basis of a healthy soil. And, if a soil is healthy, then it's going to be functioning and providing all of those ecosystem services that we rely on.
Absolutely.
Like oxygen and water.
Yeah, and that's right. So just, I don't know if you know the statistic, but what is it, for every 1% increase in soil organic carbon, it's like over 100,000 liters extra water.
166,000, which is 166,000 litres, which is a bit specific, but it's
insane, over a hectare.
Basically, yeah, exactly. So, when you see areas, even with the amount of rainfall that we've had now, and I get so horrified when I hear of places getting an inch of rainfall and it's creating flash floods. There's no need for it. we can address it right now.
Yeah.
And all of the costs and all of the hardship and social issues, and all people want to do is, or people in inverted commas, all our esteemed leaders want to do is build more dams. The solution is always technology and throwing money at the problem, where if we actually worked to improve the functioning of our soils and improve the porosity and infiltration of our soils, 1% soil organic carbon holds 144,000 litres per hectare. It's not insignificant.
Holy moly.
And it's entirely avoidable.
Yeah.
But with all the talk of floods, you will never hear any talk about improving soil health. It's always about what we can do to help businesses recover from the flood, or how much more height we're going to put on this dam, or where we put the new dam. It's crazy, because all we've got to do is change our attitude to managing soil.
Yep. And it fixes not just that problem, but many others.
It fixes so many problems.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. Yeah.
And we've certainly made that our mission, for we're dedicated to go at this till we're, in the ground, 100 years time, hopefully. But because we see it, just like you're saying, it impacts everything, our mental health, the health of our body, ties to the soil. Hence the name of this podcast is Mind, Body, Soil. It is inherently important to our survival and our abundance,
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I guess if you had a magic wand then, Jude, what I know you might have one in the cupboard.
Oh yes, many.
What do we need to do? How can we ramp this up? Or is again,
it's this $64 question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's, I guess, something that I've been working on, but I do, as we touched on earlier, I do believe that the awareness is growing, but I just think there's probably a fundamental lack of understanding or awareness of just what can be done through management. Even after grazing workshops and talking to people about the value of grazing animals, people still want to put stuff on. I think we just need to step back a little bit and let nature take its course. And if we slow down with the interference and just let things be and observe, then she'll take care of herself. But there are things that we can do to accelerate the healing, I guess. And management of those grazing animals is so critical.
Certainly.
And it doesn't have to be an enormous cost.
Mm-hmm. And I think when you say step back and let nature take its course, I feel like it's not calling us into action enough, and making us we need to actively try and understand what is happening and how we can best involve ourselves in those processes to enhance that functional or assist nature as well, because we have a really significant role to play, don't we, in as humans managing nature now.
Absolutely. Although I think we kid ourselves a little bit in terms of managing the whole process, because nature and natural processes are enormously complex and complicated. But I think it's not, stepping back doesn't mean not doing anything. It's about stepping back and taking the time to observe what's going on and taking appropriate action, rather than feeling like we've got to do something and put stuff on that it can't correct itself with time. But but that's not no management. It's being proactive about the management decisions that you take, whether or not an area needs to be resting or recovering or being impacted,
Yes.
ideally with grazing livestock, but appropriately, you know. And I guess that's the thing, you know, we always want a prescription or a solution, you know, today to problems that have taken, you know, over 100 years to create.
Yes.
So it's not going to turn around in 5 minutes, but, you know, some areas will turn around quicker than others, as we discussed. But it's, yeah, as you say, I guess being proactive about getting informed about natural processes, and but also, you know, taking the time to walk the land and look and observe, rather than being the first port of call being to load up the shuttle of Roundup or the bulk bag of fertilizer.
Yes.
Because that might accelerate or, you know, speed up some action, but you know, long term, it's only a short term solution, I guess, is what I'm suggesting.
Yeah, and if we want this to last, I mean, we need to restore the underlying function, like you say. Also, I'd like to just run something by you that I think, I mean, is sort of another big passion of ours, you know, coming, and I think that's part of our unique perspective and lens that we've been able to bring into the space, for ourselves anyway. And the conversations that we have is we come from that health and wellness background, so we've come into farming not with that, I guess, that mindset of, okay, we just need to put more on or do this and that. It's like, okay, no, that there's a natural system here, just like when we heal the human body and we go through yoga practices or things, like you realize quite quickly that you're not going to go and do the most advanced asana straight off the bat, because you will injure yourself, you know.
Absolutely.
So it takes that time to, you know, to limber up and to work into it. But I guess what I'm getting at is what we've seen is that potentially, if we are able to make ourselves healthier, then the condition of the land will also become healthier in the sense. So like you said before, you used the word empathy. I mean, that, and compassion, I think that is just such a powerful message for farmers and for people to develop that empathy and compassion. So I'd love to hear if, in your experience consulting and working with people on the land, whether that's a pattern or something that you've observed, you know, someone that is healthier. I know Christine is extremely into her health and whatnot. So I'd just be really interested to get your insights there. Yeah,
look, I generally, I think that it's true, you know. Certainly, you know, it's not something that I investigate or generally talk about, you know,
fair enough,
the health issues, but you know, there is a vibrancy about people that are working with nature. You know, it doesn't mean they don't have health issues, I guess, but you know, so you know, that's, I guess, what's most observable or apparent to me is that, you know, the people that are actually working towards creating a healthy environment have such a positive attitude, you know, and they're much more resilient, I guess. They seem to have more time, so they have more time to, you know, be doing more relaxing activities and having holidays and you know, going to things and being active in the community. And certainly, you know, you get the feel as soon as you walk onto a place, you know, whether, you know, people are really caring about that landscape, and also, you know, you get the vibe of, I don't know how I can't really put it into words, I suppose, David.
Yes.
It's but you get that feeling, or that, you know, you can feel the energy of people and the landscape, and generally the two go hand in hand. You know, it's not often that you walk onto a place that it doesn't feel right, and the people are not, there's a disconnect there. There's definitely that connection, that link between the attitude and the approach of the people and their connection with that land and the condition of that land.
100%. And even with what we've experienced in our short time in the space, and everyone, like you say, that is working with nature, like you say, is just the friendliest, got all the time in the world. They're just like you say, just vibrating at a higher frequency, and it's beautiful to be around, and that's why we love this space. It's bloody gift. So I look forward to just growing that, and it's funny because the like seem to attract like, in the sense of, and what I mean by that is that the leaders in the regenerative space all sort of know each other, and are on friendly terms with one another. It's not like, oh, they're doing that, or he doesn't know what she's talking about. It's exactly. Never like that. It's building each other up, and that's what we need to do.
It's a completely different approach to.
So I think like you say, it's socially beyond just the physical health on the farm. It does start to impact the social and community aspect. I mean, and I think that's what we need now more than ever, really.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. But none of those things happen in isolation.
Certainly not. There's a system in isolation increases in entropy, isn't it?
Yes.
Zach Bush said that. I don't know.
I heard that before. Yeah.
Paraphrasing. Awesome. Okay. Well, I think this is amazing. I think we covered some really good ground today, and illuminated some really important stuff. But I'd like to, just say, what's next for Judi Earl, and what are you, where are you putting your energy in, other than just the cows?
No, it's I've got the next month. I've got an early mark with COVID this year, so not traveling so much at the moment. Did my last trip away a few weeks ago, so the traveling has stopped a bit early this year, which is I'm very grateful for, actually. So I get to spend a bit more time on the farm than I would have otherwise. But I'm involved with a group, Soil Care, that are based over on the coast of New South Wales near Lismore, and we're just talking about a biological farming conference. So they've run at least 3 very successful conferences in the past, and we're looking to put one on this year. So putting energy into finding speakers or identifying speakers and themes for the next conference. So that'll take a bit of time, but I need to also get to work on updating my websites and things like that. IT is not one of my strong points, so I need to put some energy into updating such things, and maybe even getting a Facebook page.
Oh, geez. Keep an eye out for that.
I don't know. I'm not really into social media. Perhaps I should keep it that way. Well, leave it to the experts, Dave.
I think that sounds really great, and I think we can give our course a little plug too if we're into it. But we're very lucky to have built an online course with Judi that's been out for a couple of months now. So really good response so far, and really powerful content. It really dives into the holistic management side of things. So we did touch on some of those aspects today, but and just in, like you say, it's giving that power back to the farmers, and that's what we're really trying to do with these education products, is put the power back in the farmers' hands. What can they do that doesn't make them go down to the local rural store and have to buy every bit of fertility out of a bag or whatever. So that's exciting. I think to have you on board, and we're so blessed to be working with you. So thank you for all that, for all the hard work you put into that.
Pleasure indeed.
Yeah, super pumped. Sweet. Any closing thoughts or things that you want to add, Jude, or a call to action for people? What you think?
Oh,
Give them a little.
no, I
clip.
think I've pushed my barrows enough, David.
No, and I really appreciate you stepping outside of your comfort zone today and going into some uncharted ground, because I think if we don't start to highlight just how intrinsically connected all of these systems are, to our mental health, to our physical health, and just keep it in the soil box, and soil soil doesn't, it doesn't impact anything else than growing plants,
Yes.
then I think it won't generate enough interest. But if people start to see soil and to see nature the way that we're learning to, I mean, that's the change, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. So
bloody
thank you for the opportunity.
absolute pleasure, Jude.